All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the final, absolutely explosive chapters of the book of Acts, specifically chapters 21 through 28. Now, we aren't starting with a slow build-up today. Instead, we're immediately dropping right into the middle of a high-stakes action narrative. If you ever thought early church history was just a series of, quiet meetings, this specific section of the source material completely shatters that idea. It is a story of incredible tension, literal physical danger, and a message that just absolutely refuses to be contained. Right out of the gate, boom, the scene is set with this intense, rapid-fire conflict. The Apostle Paul, he's suddenly a wanted man. He is caught perfectly between furious, unpredictable crowds on one side and corrupt, highly calculating political leaders on the other. And both of these groups are absolutely determined to end his journey right then and there. I mean, it gets so violent that Roman commanders actually have to physically rescue Paul from being beaten to death on the Temple Mount, all while the religious elite and the Sanhedrin want him permanently silenced, just to maintain their own fragile grip on power. It's this high-pressure situation where his survival honestly seems completely unlikely. So, with all these massive, empire-level forces converging on one man, we kind of have to pause for a second and ask this central question. Can anything stop this mission? When the entire political and social machinery of the day is actively working to crush you, what happens next? Keep that question right in the back of your mind as we map out the absolute chaos that follows. Section 1. Arrested in Jerusalem. The chaos begins. You see, Paul's arrival in this deeply polarized city instantly triggers a life-threatening situation. He doesn't just face a minor disagreement, his very presence acts like a spark in a powder keg. Look at how these relentless threats against him just escalate. Day 1 starts with a spontaneous, angry mob at the temple. But as weeks turn into months, the whole nature of the danger shifts. He's dragged before corrupt Roman governors like Felix and Festus, and even King Agrippa. Eventually, this culminates in an organized, highly secretive plot where over 40 men actually take a vow not to eat or drink until they've assassinated him. The opposition literally morphs from loud and chaotic into something quiet, bureaucratic, and deadly. Section 2. Trials and Assassination Plots. The Bureaucratic Maze. We're shifting focus here from the loud, dusty streets to the quiet, marble corridors of political power. It's an incredible contrast. On one side, we have the earthly threats. The angry mobs, the corrupt governors, those organized assassins. These represent the immense, seemingly overwhelming power of the empire trying to stop Paul. But against all those earthly weapons stands God's singular, unstoppable plan for the gospel. The source material highlights this divine protection perfectly when Jesus directly appears to Paul in the barracks, promising him that just as he testified in Jerusalem, he absolutely must also testify in Rome. No matter what the governor's scheme or the assassin's vow, that protective plan simply does not yield. Section 3. The Mediterranean Storm, Man versus Nature. But hey, just when you think you understand the threats, the narrative completely pivots. Earthly politics fail to stop Paul, so he finally begins his long journey toward Rome. But the battlefield instantly changes from the courtroom to the open ocean. Just as those political threats start to recede in the rearview mirror, a massive hurricane-force wind, specifically called a northeastern in the text, strikes their ship. They are battered for 14 agonizing days in complete darkness, desperately throwing their cargo overboard just to stay afloat. The ship is pushed entirely to the brink of destruction. Nature is essentially threatening to do exactly what the governors and the assassins couldn't, drag Paul beneath the waves and silence him forever. Section 4. Shipwreck on Malta. Disaster and Deliverance. I mean, picture this. Just imagine the splintered wood, the exhausted travelers, that sheer desperation of washing up on some unknown shore. The catastrophic shipwreck leaves them completely stranded on the island of Malta. They've lost absolutely everything. But rather than dying of exposure, deliverance arrives in the form of highly specific miraculous events. Right there on the beach, Paul miraculously survives a lethal viper bite without swelling up or dropping dead, completely shocking the locals. He then goes on to heal the father of the island's chief official. The narrative turns a complete catastrophe into a triumph. The wreckage? It merely served as a layover, and the journey finally continues toward its ultimate destination. The disaster was real, for sure, but the deliverance was greater. Section 5. The Heart of the Empire. Arrival in Rome. At long last, the pacing of our story really slows down here as we reach the physical climax. After the riots, the assassination plots, the corrupt governors, the terrifying 14-day storm, and an actual shipwreck, Paul finally steps foot in Rome. The source material summarizes this moment beautifully with the idea that the gospel reaches the heart of the empire. Really think about the magnitude of that statement for a second. Even though Paul arrives in chains, under house arrest, he is preaching boldly and unhindered. The mission is accomplished. Despite every conceivable obstacle the ancient world could possibly throw at it, the message has successfully infiltrated the absolute capital of the Roman world. Section 6. The unfinished mission, the twist ending. Now, if this were just your standard history textbook, Paul's arrival in Rome would be the perfect place to just, roll the credits. The hero made it to the capital. But this narrative has a thematic climax that completely changes how we're supposed to interact with the text. The ancient history we just survived connects directly to the modern world you're sitting in right now. The source stresses that the exact same Holy Spirit that empowered Peter, the exact same God who transformed Paul, and the same gospel that reached the heart of Rome is still actively changing lives today. This isn't just some dusty museum exhibit of ancient events, it's an active, ongoing force. And honestly, that explains this incredibly bold stylistic choice in the text itself. The book of Acts ends entirely differently than most books. There's no neat final conclusion. There's no grand ending scene tying up all the loose ends. There is absolutely no closing chapter for the church. Why? Because the story of the gospel is still being written. The book intentionally leaves the door wide open. It is, by design, unfinished. Which leaves us with this one final lingering thought. Because the book of Acts has no real ending, the source makes it incredibly clear that every believer is actually part of the next chapter. The unstoppable mission that survived the mobs, the governors, and the sea is now in your hands. So the ultimate question this history demands of us today is simply this: how are you writing yours?